My name is Ankita Hudedagaddi. I'm a former scientist engineer from ISRO. I used to work at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Trivandrum. Oriented towards astronomy, what do you think are the reasons for us to be discussing rocket science today? Can anyone tell me what you imagine the speed of a rocket might be? Like when it is injecting a satellite into orbit? Even if one thing fails, one small component fails, it's a disaster. You might know about Kalpana Chawla's why do we even go to space? That's the fundamental question. Why don't we use airplanes to put a satellite into orbit? We will just try and see what are the various parts of a rocket. Then building a satellite, this is just a very small portion. And then finally we come to the launching of a rocket. My name is Ankita Hudedagaddi. I'm a former scientist engineer from ISRO. I used to work at the Vikram Sarabhai Space Center in Trivandrum. I worked there for 3.5 years. In my short stint there, I have participated in 12 launches, PSLV C-42 to C-52, as well as GSLV F-10. And Goa is my home. I grew up in Goa. I studied till 10th standard in St. Mary's Convent High School, Mapsa. After 10th, I moved out of Goa, and now finally I'm back for a short career break. So I'm really happy to be here. I have graduated in aerospace engineering from Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology. That is again in Trivandrum. It is a college that is run by the Department of Space. How many of you are aware of IIST? Yeah, that's great. Very good. So a quick poll before we begin. How many people under 12 years of age?
I'm just 12.
All right. That's quite a few people. Under 20? All right. Thank you. I just want to share that this presentation does not require a science background as such. How many of you with a science background, that is people who are 15 and above, how many of you have a science background? Okay, very few. So this is intended for a general audience. A lot of this is kind of simple. You might already be familiar with a lot of content. So please bear with me if you already know it. And if you know something more about it, which is not mentioned, please feel free to share that so all of us can learn with you. All right, let's begin with the talk then. That was quite a long ramble. So can anyone tell me, today, we've gathered here today for the lunar eclipse. This is an association that is oriented towards astronomy. What do you think are the reasons for us to be discussing rocket science today? Anyone? You can venture any guesses that you might have. Do you see the importance of rocket science in your life, in your daily life? Yes, please.
You're like a ISRO engineer, right?
Okay.
Like rocket science might help us in the future, like to model a rocket or like mechanics of rockets.
All right, that is a perfect answer. Rocket science, in fact, not only your individual future, rocket science happens to be the future that we are headed towards. Right now, there are a lot of revolutions that are going on. Artificial intelligence is already here. Quantum computing is almost here. Rocket science has always been here, but we are moving towards the future and we are making such great strides in this field like never before. There has been a very renewed interest in rocket science in the recent years. So, of course, you might have heard of all these new initiatives that have been launched by ISRO. Can anybody name what are the future plans? Yes? Gaganyaan. Anything else? All right. Nisar. Perfect. Nisar is a collaborative satellite which is being built by both ISRO and NASA together. All right. SSLV is there. Small Satellite Launch Vehicle. It is a new launch vehicle which is coming up. Something called HRLV, which is the human-rated launch vehicle, is coming up. Something called the Heavy Lift Launch Vehicle is coming up. And you also have so many launches that are being conducted by all these private agencies. The space sector, like Sir mentioned, in India has been thrown open to private players after a monopoly of nearly 75 years. That is a state monopoly of nearly 75 years. Nobody except the government was allowed to work in the space sector until 1-2 years ago. So there are many startups like Agnikul, Skyroot, Pixel, you have Dhruva Aerospace, you have companies like SatSure. All these companies which are based in India today are building satellites, are building rockets for launch. So if you want to pursue a career in space science, ISRO is no longer the only option that you have. You can always go and apply to these startups. You can get jobs there. You can pursue a career in space. So it's new, exciting times in India, which is why rocket science becomes all the more important. We can no longer afford to ignore this term or feel intimidated by this term. It's something very basic, even though it has a very bad reputation. Like Sir mentioned, if something is tough, people say, it's not rocket science, you figure it out. Even for the toughest of things, people will be like, oh, it's not rocket science, figure it out. But the thing is, the complexity of rocket science does not come from the subject matter. The complexity in rocket science comes because there are so many components, thousands of components which are working together at very high speeds. For example, can anyone tell me what you imagine the speed of a rocket might be? Like when it is injecting a satellite into orbit? Yes? Please tell. No, please encourage her. Yeah, tell me.
6,000 kilometers per hour
More like 6,000 kilometers.
per second.
It's like 8 kilometers per second. Around that much. But I think it will come about to the same number. If you like convert it to seconds, it should come around the same number. So basically, when a rocket is inserting a satellite into orbit, it goes to velocities, that is speeds, of nearly 8 kilometers per second. Now you can imagine 8 kilometers. 1 second, 8 kilometers. These are very high speeds. You think about a road accident in which a car is going at 80 kilometers per hour. Okay, 80 kilometers per hour. That is, if you convert it to seconds, it comes around 0.002% of the rocket speed. If this car, which is going at 80 kilometers per hour, meets with an accident, it will turn into a ball of flames at such low speeds. And you can imagine a rocket with thousands of components in it is going at a speed of 8 kilometers per second at extreme temperatures under extreme conditions, not on Earth. The complexity comes in figuring out how to make each and every one of these components work perfectly in sync with each other. Even if one thing fails, one small component fails, it's a disaster. You might know about Kalpana Chawla's death, right? Can anyone tell me why the failure of the rocket happened? Heat shield.
But the heat shield was not placed properly and it came off. That's why the wing fully blasted up.
Okay, it was actually the failure of an O-ring. O-ring is something like in a pressure cooker, you have that gasket, right? So when you're keeping a container pressurized, there are small O-rings. It's called an O-ring in other terminology. So one of these O-rings malfunctioned. Due to the malfunction of a single O-ring, so many astronauts lost their life. It was a catastrophic failure. So many billions of dollars were lost. That is why rocket science becomes complicated. Not because of the subject matter. Laws of physics that you study in high school are the same laws which are applicable everywhere. That's why they're called universal laws, right? A lot of these laws are called universal laws of motion. That's because whether it is the question of an apple falling on Newton's head or it is the question of a rocket launch, these laws stay the same. This makes it all the more important for all you kids here to pay attention in school. After you go out of school, these are the fundamental building blocks which can even help you build rockets in the future. Science, high school science in particular, is extremely important in order to achieve anything significant in fields like these. So with that, I'd like to begin with the main presentation. Okay, so the objective of this is to give everybody a basic understanding of what rockets are, what rocket launches are, so that next time you see a TV telecast of any ISRO launch, you can appreciate it a little better than you do right now. So I hope you can take away something like this from this presentation. How many of you have seen an ISRO launch before? Any rocket, any mission? A good number of you, a good number of you. Okay, so let's see if you can get something new from this presentation, okay? So this presentation is divided into 5 parts. The first part is, why do we even go to space? That's the fundamental question. Why? Why do we do it? Why do we do the things that we do? Why go to space? Second part, we will explore, why don't we use airplanes to launch a rocket into space? To put a satellite into orbit. Have you ever wondered this? Airplanes also fly, right? You just put something in an airplane, go put it in orbit. Why don't we do it? So we will explore that particular question, okay? Then the third part we will just try and see what are the various parts of a rocket. We will try and develop analogies with, common everyday vehicles that we see, like for example, a car. We will see like the role played by certain components of a car. Is there any analogous component in a rocket? That way you'll be able to relate to it better. Then building a satellite, this is just a very small portion. I do not have expertise in satellite building. I'm an aerospace engineer, not an avionics engineer. So we will just explore the basic components of a satellite. And then finally we come to the launching of a rocket. All right? Everyone with me? Okay. I hope you stay awake till the end of this. I hope so. All right? Why go to space? So, what are the, without reading the slides, please focus. Without reading the slides, can anyone tell me, in your daily life, what are the applications of space technology? Does anybody know? Mobile phones, communication, okay then. Weather reports, perfect. Met department reports. Anything else? Security, okay, defense purposes, right? Then? Maps, of course. GPS. Navigation. Perfect. What's going on outside? Space exploration. What's going on, like for example, you have the James Webb Space Telescope. You have AstroSat. You have all these observatories which are there in space. All right. So just a brief introduction. There are multiple reasons why we would want to go to space. The primary reason why it started out at the very beginning, of course, is curiosity. Humans have always been very curious animals. We are a very curious species. And space has always evoked a kind of wonder in humans from the beginning of time, since the beginning of time. So of course, scientific research and curiosity is one of the primary reasons why we even started exploring space. We have had missions like the Voyager, the James Webb Space Telescope, and recently we've had even Chandrayaan-3 and Aditya L1, which Sir just mentioned, going out to conduct scientific research in space. Under space applications, of course, there are 3 types of satellites that we can launch. All of you have given all the answers, but I'll just touch upon it. There are 3 basic applications. First is Earth observation, second is communication, and third is navigation. When we say Earth observation, as somebody mentioned, weather reports, it's very important for that. Second is even you can do crop monitoring with that, vegetation cover, all these global warming studies, ocean flow studies, all of these happen through Earth observation satellites. Then communication satellites, of course, all our communication, like you mentioned, all the communication that happens comes through these satellites. Then, of course, navigation, Google Maps, we have a set of satellites called GPS. It's basically synonymous, right? When we say navigation, we think GPS. But India also has a fleet of navigation satellites. Anyone knows? Navic, perfect. We have Navic satellites. Gagan, yeah, Gagan is geo-augmented. You have an augmentation of those satellites itself. GPS is actually a set of satellites that were built by the US. Now it has become synonymous with navigation everywhere, all around the world. India has a set of satellites called Navic, and now these Navic-enabled systems are going to come out in the new Apple phone. If you ever come across it, you can probably appreciate that better. Then you have all these self-drive cars, basically Tesla and cars like that. They are the cars of the future. They're all equipped with these instruments. And there's one more thing. A lot of fishermen's boats are equipped with NAVIC systems because fishermen are very likely to get lost at sea. And for them to be able to navigate back to the coast properly, when there are no satellite, like there are no mobile towers in the ocean, right? There is no network once you go way deep into the ocean. So they're equipped with these special modules which are based on NAVIC satellites, which help them reach safely back to the coast. Other reasons, defense, somebody mentioned defense. National security is a major concern. Now, you might know that land, air, and water are considered the traditional domains of warfare. All wars that have been fought for the longest duration until maybe the last few decades used to be fought on these three domains, either on land, in the ocean, or in the air. That's why we have the Army, Navy, and Air Force. A fourth domain has emerged of late in the last 2 decades. Can anyone tell me what's the fourth domain?
Was it a Cold War in space? Russia and US?
All right, that was not strictly a war. Cold War was happening on Earth, but they were competing in space. That's a different thing, okay? I will come to that. But it's a good answer. It's very nice that you're aware of it. The fourth domain that emerged was cyber warfare, right? Even now, recently in the Russia-Ukraine war, you've had hackers from both sides of the line attacking each other's critical infrastructure, which is based on cyber infrastructure. Cyber infrastructure is all our data. All our data, like for example, Aadhaar, all our phone numbers, everything is collected in central infrastructure. These things are being attacked. This is the fourth domain that has emerged, called cyber warfare. There's a fifth domain also which has emerged, which is space-based warfare. How many of you know that there's a new space force? Like you have Army, Navy, and Air Force. The US has started a new space force. Countries like UK are also investing towards a space force where they're specifically training engineers and soldiers to combat space-based warfare. About 2 years ago, India also conducted a test called the Mission Shakti. Does anyone remember what this was about? All right. This was a very low-key, under-the-radar test which was conducted where ISRO placed a dummy satellite into space. We placed a dummy satellite into orbit. There was nothing on it. There was just some, thermal sensors, and it was giving signals to ground stations back home. DRDO and the Defense Ministry together, they came together and they launched a missile towards this dummy satellite. They basically wanted to see, does India have the capability to destroy a satellite in space using a missile launched from Earth? And this mission was successful. We are one of the very few countries in the world who are capable of this. And it is a proud achievement for us, and it basically prepares us for in the event of any future warfare. Because if you see, anybody can launch a spy satellite and make it hover over India and spy over India. It's a major defense security threat, right? So Mission Shakti basically helped us move a step closer towards future readiness. In case space-based warfare becomes the norm, then we will be ready for the future. All right? Then, of course, a thing that is lesser spoken about is the role of space in international relations. ISRO is a matter of pride. India's launches are a matter of pride for us within the country. But it also raises our status and our prestige amongst nations of the world. Like Sir mentioned earlier, countries like Nepal, Bhutan cannot afford their own space program. And no country in the world today can survive without satellites. So countries like ISRO are helping out these countries, establishing these ties and friendships that will help us in the future. The more the amount of contact, the more the amount of friendliness that a country has with your own country, the less likely it is to wage a war against you, right? Correct? That's why all these diplomatic channels which are used to establish these cultural links, to go and give scientific training in other countries, all these are done basically to establish these, to forge these strong links so that in the future we don't engage in war with each other. And in case our own country is in trouble, countries which are on good terms with us, with whom we have established friendly relations, are able to come and help us out in such situations. All right? So global collaboration is also one other thing. International Space Station, as many of you might know, is the result of global collaboration between many countries of the world. India was not a part of it because this happened like very long ago. But now recently, you must have heard about USA signing the Artemis Accords, right? Artemis program is where they are trying to send the next generation of astronauts to the moon. They are trying to make the moon a gateway to other planets of the solar system. Now that you just, the documentary which was screening earlier also spoke about it. It spoke about training of Artemis astronauts, right? So the Artemis Accord has recently been signed by India. A lot of our Gaganyaan astronauts who were chosen are now going for training to these countries. We had trained, our astronauts had trained in Russia. Now they are going to Europe, they are going to the US and to all other countries which are involved in the International Space Station. This becomes very important because the International Space Station is a mixture of parts from different countries. So if our astronauts have to ever go and stay on the International Space Station, they need to be well versed with the systems of every country. So just training in Russia is not enough. They need to train in every country that has helped and build the International Space Station. And of course, recently there has been an announcement by our Prime Minister that India is also aiming for a space station of our own. So maybe like 20 years down the line, many of you would have contributed to building that space station. I hope that happens. Now, other reasons are commercial exploration. Resources extraction from space is something that is being talked about. A lot of private companies are interested in this. A lot of research is going on in that. Space tourism, you might have already heard all these fights between, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk as to who is going into space first and who will send whom to space first. Space tourism is an emerging area. Space is also a source of frontier tech and also technological spin-offs. You know the Kevlar coating on your non-stick pans at home? That is a technological spin-off of space technology. These technology, what you mean by tech spin-off is, to go to space, we develop certain technology. But then we look at it and we're like, oh, this can be used on Earth as well, not only in space. And then these research agencies, like for example, NASA and ISRO, they will take this technology, they will share it with local industries in the country. And these industries will come up with these products, which will have these tech spin-offs, all right? So to change the pace a little bit, let's move on to designing our own launch vehicle. Let's see if we can do that in maybe the next half an hour, all right? Usually what happens is a mission requirement is given, and then you need to figure out which launch vehicle to pick, which mode of transport to pick, how many other satellites can go along with it, and which orbit are you going to place it in, and when exactly you're going to launch it and from where. All these decisions have to be made after the first condition is given. So the first requirement here, the condition that we've been given, is that we want to put a 1,100 kg Earth observation satellite in a polar orbit to study the surface of oceans at a height of 740 kilometers from the Earth's surface. All right? This is a hypothetical scenario, but when I say it is hypothetical, it is actually closely linked to the mission requirement of an Earth observation satellite which was launched in November 2022 by a PSLV rocket. Okay, this is the image that was taken by that particular satellite. I'm not sure if the contrast is very clear, but this satellite had actually gone ahead and photographed algae floating off coast Argentina. So it is very important for climate change studies and pollution studies. This is one of the images that was taken by the satellite. This image has been processed by NRSE, which is the National Remote Sensing Center. It is located in Hyderabad. It is under the Department of Space. So whatever images our satellites send back to us, they are processed in Hyderabad. Now, coming to the type of orbits, are people aware of what a polar orbit is and what an equatorial orbit is? You might have heard. All right, I'll just explain it. All of you know that the Earth spins around an axis, right? You know what the equator is. Then you have the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Then you have the Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle. You have the North Pole and the South Pole, right? The axis passes through the North Pole and the South Pole. Now, as the Earth is rotating, if you put a satellite in orbit which goes along the equator, this one, you imagine an axis which is going like this. The equator is going like this. If a satellite goes around the equator, it is known as an equatorial orbit, okay? If a satellite goes in a perpendicular direction, that is, it goes around the poles, then it is called a polar orbit. With me? Yes. All right. So, Earth observation satellites are usually launched in polar orbits. Polar orbits are usually at a height of 200 to 1000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. 200 to 1000. That means from Goa, if you go to the tip of India, at the bottom towards Kanyakumari, that will be around 1000 kilometers. That's the height. Mount Everest, how high is Mount Everest? 8,000 meters, perfect. It's around 8,000 meters. Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth, is only 8 kilometers from the Earth's surface. Satellites, on the other hand, are placed in orbits which range from a height of 200 to 1,000 kilometers in polar orbits. Something even more fascinating is that when you're placing communication satellites, that is, the satellites that send signals to your phone, right? Those have to be placed in equatorial orbits. And equatorial orbits are 36,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. Not just 200,000 kilometers, 36,000 kilometers from the Earth's surface. Now, there is one important point that we can get from this. For an Earth observation satellite, we are putting it in a polar orbit. We are putting it in a much lower height orbit. Why do you think that's happening? Earth observation satellites.
So we can get a more clear image of what.
Perfect. Absolutely. Brilliant answer. You need a clearer image for Earth observation satellites. You can't place a satellite at a height of 36,000 kilometers when you need a clear image. That's why Earth observation satellites are either placed in polar orbits or something called the low Earth orbits, which are not necessarily going around poles, but they will be going around at some inclination. All right? That's a perfect answer. Very good.
काय बरेलो बांगडो म्हाका मायन दिलेलो कोण रे मेल्यान त्याचो दोळो फोडिल्लो आयलो आयलो गो कचरोवालो आयलो आगो आगो बेगीन कर तो कचरोवालो आयलो तूं आनी कितें गो मागीर म्हाज्या नांवान बोवाळ मारतले यो यो बेगीन यो
धरलो
कितें
आणि तो म्हजेर बेजार जाता म्हाका लज जाता आणि आणि या वोल्या कचऱ्यान प्लास्टीक पोती घालप
आगो पण ओली जाता मगो ती पळय पळय हात लावन पळय
शी 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 केन्ना अक्कल येतली रे तुका ही पळय ही भाजयेची ही नुस्त्याची आणि ही बाकीच्या सामानाची पूण ना तुका जाय ती प्लास्टिकूच नागरिक म्हणून आमची कितें जबाबदारी आसा काय ना एकटो सरकार कांयच करूंक शकना आणि कचऱ्याच्या बाबतीत तर नाच ना
म्हणजे कितें करप तर आमी
अरे कचरो कितलेशेच प्रकारचो असता 7 ते 8 प्रकार वखदांचो वेगळो कचरो काचेचो वेगळो कचरो इलेक्ट्रिकचो वेगळो कचरो तरी सरकार दोनूच सांगता वलो आणि सुको आणि तरी तुझ्याकडे ते जायना दारादारांनी कचरो व्हरपाक येऊन सुद्धा गटारांनी रस्त्याच्या कुशीक कचऱ्याचे ढिगारेच मरे आणि हो कचरो कोण करता आमीच मरे मागीर म्हाका सांग हातून सरकार कितें करतलो
सारकें तुजें चुकता आमचेच.
अरे सावंत सरकारान कचरो जाग्यार घालपाक कितलेशेच प्रकल्प उभे केल्यात. सालिगांव, कुणय, पिसुल्ल्या आणि हेर जाग्यार कितलेशेच नवे प्रकल्प नेटान चालू आसात. सरकार आपले काम आपले परीन पुराय जोर लावन करता, पूण गरज आसा आमी जबाबदार जावपाची. कितें
नव्या तमाचे सेरतुतराचे हे आमचे सरकार. सावंताच्या खाला सपना जाता साकार. गोंयाचो फुल्लारे फुडार, खोशिया सारे गोंयकार.
आता ओल्यान ओलो आणि सुक्यान सुको.
गोंयान उरलो ना कचऱ्याचो धोको. आता भिवपाची
गरज ना.
दरेक गोंयकाराचो आधार डॉक्टर प्रमोद सावंताचे गोंय सरकार.